Welcome to our chat. My name is Alyssa. I'm a Next 36 alum and helping moderate our chat with Brice today. And so welcoming you all on behalf of Next. A little bit of housekeeping. So this speaker series is a part of an ongoing series. There's going to be another one on Wednesday with the CEO, Joe, and Jordan Jacobs from Radical Adventures. And the idea is just, we're all going through this insane crisis at exactly the same time. As far as I know, this is the first time the world has experienced something like this precisely together. And Next is just bringing in leaders who have either been through crises or built companies to help us all navigate. A lot of us are going through a lot of the same things. A next announcement, cohorts are proceeding as scheduled. So if you have friends who are applying, tell them to still do so. That was the same with Y Combinator. I think Techstars, I'm not sure what they're doing, but a lot of these programs are delivering virtually. Okay, for everybody just joining, welcome. I love seeing so many videos on. I invite you to join us on video as you're gonna need to get used to the new world, which is we all hang out and meet each other over video. So Samantha Phelan, I see only your name and not your beautiful face. Same with you, Martin, Raphael, Jason, I'm just calling people out now. Brayden, turn your video on. George. All right, this is great. And don't worry, not only you're looking at you, we're not looking at you. Okay, so let's get going. So as I mentioned, my name's Alyssa. I'm a Next 36 alum. I was in the 2013 cohort, and Next has asked me to give a bit of background as it's helpful and interesting, as I'm a founder like you navigating this crisis for the first time. My startup inside of Next did not work, as many of them don't. And I spent some time afterward at Top Hat and then for 4 years at CareGuide. And now I'm the founder and CEO of Lilia. So Lilia just went through the Y Combinator batch. And Lilia is an egg freezing concierge. So we help women explore their fertility options and take next steps toward egg freezing. I see egg freezing as a reproductive equalizer. And for this reason, I think egg freezing will be as common as birth control. And so we're making this path easy for women. And like I mentioned, I just finished YC. So I can share a little bit more about kind of what I've been seeing, both in YC and SF and what I'm kind of experiencing now. And then we're going to get into Brice sharing his background. He's been through every crisis that's come through since 1987, I think it was. And so he's going to take us through some content and take us through some advice, and then we'll do some questions. So backing up just a little bit, things that I've just got back from San Francisco a few weeks ago, things that I saw there. The trope is kind of true, like people in SF are wildly ambitious, unreasonably so. And I noticed that people there aren't as scared to fail. In San Francisco, if you fail, you kind of just like go on a vacation and then you work at a friend's startup and then you go and do your next startup. And that's something that I think would be really good for Canadian founders to embody as well. And then, even inside of YC or like with the YC Halo, there are a lot of existential challenges that we're all facing right now. Fundraising's been really hard for a ton of companies. Some haven't even been able to. A lot of people's entire revenue streams have just been crushed. They're needing to find new markets to sell into and needing to find kind of like hair on fire problems. I am noticing that angels are still investing more so, but it's a really hard fundraising environment right now. There are also a ton of opportunities, like the world's not going to be the same after this, right? Decades of regulation have been unfastened for the sake of health and speed. And so we're all kind of being thrust into this digital world. So what they kind of told us is just to get really curious. We heard that from Reza as well, as there's going to be a lot of new opportunities. And Lilia's path, we've been formed by constantly talking to customers, iterating on their feedback. There's all kinds of new opportunities that are existing for us too. So I'm thinking a lot about what the future looks like and how we can kind of take advantage of it, because we're all accelerating toward this future. Industries are crumbling and others are busting open. The last thing I'll say before moving this over to Brice is this is a really hard time, and it's okay if you're not at your best right now or your most productive. We are living through this collective trauma together. And so if you're finding yourself having a hard time, it's probably not that you're lazy. You're just experiencing whiplash and trying to find your grip in this new life being thrust upon you. So, we're going to make it out of this. It sounds cheesy, but like truly new opportunities will emerge. Some of our companies will die, and some of us will start brand new companies amid the new opportunities that are presented. So let's talk about what making it out of this looks like. So Brice is joining us. You probably know him as the co-founder of Wind, which sold for over $1.5 billion, and now is the CEO of Globalive. And good friend of Next, we all know Tony Lacavera, who's worked closely with Brice. So Brice has been, like I said, through every crisis since 1987. And he's going to take us through some themes: landscape now, cash flow and survival, runway and fundraising, and then some kind of like second order consequences. And so these are the rules of the game. So we've all submitted questions to Brice we've submitted questions through the form that John and Bisha sent out. And so we're going to run through those. If you have a question as we go through, just add it to the Zoom chat. Important, say your question in one sentence or less. If it's too long, I'm not going to read it and it's going to get skipped over. And please try to ask questions that can be useful to the group. Like, if you're one of the very, very, very few people whose businesses are booming right now, we're very happy for you. And there's lots of documentation on how to blitz scale. But I think we're most of us here looking at trying to survive and just get through this. So Brice, I'm going to hand it over to you to kind of maybe open up with just what you're seeing in the landscape and take us through some general thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, John. Thank you, the Next team, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. I see some familiar faces on the screens. If you're not on video, get with the new world of work. As we talk about selling and customer discovery, one of the first lessons is you have to have your video on, and you have to be very personal in these virtual environments. And in fact, it can become more effective as a selling and discovery tool, which we'll talk to as we go through the remarks. But very quickly, I just want to speak to background a little bit more in depth to give you a lens as to kind of our portfolio and how it crosses a lot of different categories, which gives us an interesting kind of way to see things from a bunch of different sides. So as Alyssa said, Tony and I have been working together for a very long time. We co-founded Wind in 2008, right in the middle of the last crisis, actually. And on that note, I was working in the .com 1.0 and at September 11th. And I was in high school in 1987, so I don't want to date myself too much, but I do remember the stock market crash. And each one sucks, as we know. Some of you will have been around for some of the more recent ones. Each one feels almost like the end of the world, and so on. But we do get through it. Often there's a thing about kind of overreacting to what will actually happen in the short term, but underreacting to what will happen in the long term. There's probably some truth to that statement here as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a number of different issues. I did a Tech TO talk. It was a 10-minute hit on right-sizing your business. We're going to cover some of those themes, but we're going to go into more detail, and we're going to start moving along to a framework we've developed that starts thinking forward. Okay. And so where I'll start with is on a macro basis. Something like this has really never happened in the modern, what we'll call the modern age. And by that, I mean like post-World War II. And really, it's amazing to think about, but this whole urgency has really been only in the last month, which it's almost impossible to believe that if you think back a month ago, I was in Ottawa doing a presentation on how great our innovation economy was almost exactly a month ago. A week later, I was doing a presentation on right-sizing your business. It makes your head spin. I also find it interesting more philosophically that it does expose some of the challenges we have in both politics, in business, and just as a human condition around some inability to plan long-term on some of the bigger threats to our societies. And I hope that what will come out of this will be some new and better long-term kind of thinking. One can always hope, and we'll see, but you guys are all part of the solution as innovators, and I encourage you to stay involved and learn from this, obviously, in all ways. We do have some interesting things to look around to. Canada's kind of fallen in the middle of the curve in terms of timing of this crisis. We have data that we can draw upon from countries that are approaching it differently. The poster child, I believe, is Sweden, where they're not locking down and isolating the entire country. They're doing it more at a high risk level and letting the rest of society kind of function. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. And also, we're seeing China and certain other countries who were from a time frame ahead of us starting to emerge from this, some data always being questioned, but let's say starting to emerge from this. So we will learn a lot more before we have to experience it around second and third wave. And I encourage everyone, as we've been talking about this, to look outward much more than you're looking inward, and get, talk to people, talk to data, talk to mentors, keep yourself out there to understand the data and the opportunities that will arise. Importantly, over the past decade, the Canadian innovation ecosystem has changed significantly. And I always kind of draw our ecosystem as follows. We had the pre-dot-com 1.0, which was sadly defined by the rise and fall of Nortel. We had the next phase, which was sadly defined by the rise and fall of BlackBerry. And then we have the third phase, which is a far more robust ecosystem with a lot more foundation to it, a lot more government as a partner. We have organizations like Next, which are organizing these kinds of things. Look at, we've got 60 or 70 people on this, 90 people, sorry, that are all involved in this ecosystem, that are helping each other, and that are acting as a community effectively. And that's super important to get through these types of things. One cannot do this alone. You are not alone. And we should be leaning on each other to push our way through this. So back to framework. When I did that Tech TO talk, it was a first order discussion about survivability. We've now refined our framework to cross 3 orders, and I'll just very quickly go through them. So first order is the triage. It's the wartime. It's adjusting your work environment for remote work. It's getting a cadence of communication with key stakeholders, creating feedback loops to understand what's going on with your customers, your employees, and your suppliers, which will filter both up to the leadership team and back down to the field and the interactions with customers. It's figuring out how to forecast your revenue and collections, how to size your costs, how to size your CapEx, how to then calculate cash flow and runway, close any financings that are in process, start monitoring and applying for government support, some very initial customer product assessment type stuff, and basically just getting through 2 to 3 weeks of all of the mayhem that happens when you have such a fundamental change in such a short period of time. I'll talk to this in a second, but we are seeing most companies as primarily through first order, okay? And that leads me to the second order, which is take a breath. You got through first order, you've got to organize yourself. Now you start talking about something we call plan ahead or plan forward. McKinsey put out a very, very good thought leadership piece around starting to think forward on what to do next now that you've gotten through wartime. And if I could summarize, it's basically starting to put core people with very designated authorities in things like understanding customer needs better, understanding product moves quicker, understanding how to cut through a lot of the bureaucracy in a company, recognizing that 75% is good enough. It doesn't have to be 100%. Customers will be more forgiving for quick moves to add value to them, and so on and so forth. But the point is having a structure and a framework to starting to plan ahead. Customer discovery. We're going to take in this conversation people back to the first principles of customer discovery. I've been talking a lot to scaling companies, 150 plus employees, and I had to actually literally give them a lesson from Creative Destruction Lab that we use to take them back to how to think about discovery. We'll talk about that here. Reviewing your product, adjusting for customer feedback of things that they need that are very relevant to them. Retooling sales processes. You are not calling a customer and saying, hey, can I close that sale? We were just about to close before the crisis. That is not what they're thinking about anymore. And so we have to talk a little more about that. And then on third order is starting to look out even further. And third order comprises things like starting to think about mergers and acquisitions, okay? There will be wounded companies with great teams and great products and some customers that will be purchasable, that could add, you could give them a home in some cases, or you may find yourself in a need to sell yourself. There's no shame in that. Some people might have to look at pausing their business. The survivability becomes an issue depending on what's happening with your customers and your customers' customers. We'll talk about that. And last but not least, bigger strategic opportunities and bigger potential pivot and bigger move opportunities that might even position you for market share gains in an interesting way. Those 3 orders that I talked about are not sequential. They run in parallel. You might be hopping into one faster than other people are, and so on. But if I could generalize, people are past or getting past this first order, and they're kind of firmly implanting themselves in some of the second and third order thinking, okay? There's a saying that says, never let a crisis go to waste. There's an opportunity right now to make quick decisions, to have certain types of conversations with customers, to move faster and break things a little bit more than one typically does. and one should look to take advantage of that. If you come through this, you will be a survivor in the culling process that a crisis inevitably brings, and it will create a whole host of new opportunities. So very important to think about. The other thing that we think a lot about at Globalive Capital is every crisis that we've been through has created very interesting and unpredictable opportunities that you need to be exploring and discovering as part of this process. The other, just to conclude on this first framework here, I am not a forecaster. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know how or where this will end. People can ask questions about what I think. It doesn't matter. I'm going to look at the same data you guys are. I'm going to draw conclusions, and I'm going to be discovering continuously. What I will say is follow the following mantras. Number one is control what you can control. And number two is always measure what matters. You need to bring it back to metrics and operations and finance. Okay. So super important points. And then last, there is a staggering amount of resources that are flowing right now to help you navigate your way through this crisis. Next is a great place. There's 100 other community organizations in our ecosystem that are putting out materials. You can't read it all, but there's a lot of relevant stuff. You don't have to go through this alone.
Okay, cool. That's super helpful, Brice. So what I'm hearing you say is like, go back to fundamentals. What are first principles of your business? And are you building from there? Hold headspace to think of where the future is going and how can you monetize on those opportunities. And so can we shift now to cash flow survival? Like, how do we get through this next phase? Folks, as you have questions about this topic, shoot them in the Zoom chat and we'll try and bring them up as we go through.
Thank you. And we will talk about cash flow. I do want to go back to one thing. You hit the perfect phrase. You said back to first principles. When we talk about financing, what we're hearing in the ecosystem right now is we've spent the last few years at a growth of at all costs kind of mindset, and valuations getting pushed up and all the things that we know that we talk about. We are, for the first time in a long time, hearing words like unit economics, path to profitability, one financing and done, show me what it looks like, those kinds of things. So we are back to what I call truly first principles around unit economics, around customer discovery, around, classic sales and marketing, and we'll come back to that. So back to cash flow and survival. So, okay, there are three components that I start with, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts. And this is a bit of a replication of my tech talk, and I'll do it a little faster. So first of all is mentality. Sequoia put out the Black Swan memo that we all know so well that talked about the crisis coming. That tripped the ecosystem to really get engaged. Okay, the framework that one, or the mentality that one wants to be, is wartime, is triage, is urgency, is focused on survivability and triage. Okay. Second, framework. What framework does one use in a situation like this? Because there's so many unknowns, what we recommend is a very simple cash flow forecasting framework that utilizes lessons from actually bankruptcy monitors and receivers, where you look at a 3-month cash flow by week and then a 3-month cash flow after that by month. So 6 months of cash flow. It's dynamic. It has scenarios. It's constantly being iterated as you learn more about what your customers are doing, what they're paying, what kind of discounts they need, if they're needing pauses, and so on and so forth. And as you're continuously sizing your costs. Okay, that spits out what is the core output, which is a cash balance over time, and that tells you what your runway is, what your cash out date is, to use a term, and based on when that cash out date is, and that will change as your inputs change and the dynamism of modeling happens. If that number drops below a certain time period, then we're going to talk very specifically about how one manages financing and runway. But let's move back to the model for a second. So revenue and collections are cash inflows. So very quickly, let's figure out our cash coming in. We start with revenue forecast. That can be very difficult to do if you're selling tech to restaurants, and all restaurants in North America have shut down except for takeout, delivery, and drive-through. That makes it very hard to know how much your customers are going to care about paying for your, in my example, software product, and whether it's essential or not to them. So there is this discovery process that is going in a feedback loop, as I've mentioned a few times, from customers coming into your organization, feeding up to a leadership team, to a finance organization that should be dynamically modeling that side of your business, revenue. And it probably has to be scenarioized downward into a number of different scenarios that are changing as you get more data. And then it needs to get extended to collections. We are particularly concerned in this crisis about people having signed up for stuff, contracted for stuff, and then being unable to pay because they view this expense as obviously less relevant in my example to headcount or something like that. So both sales and collections are important to model and to dynamize and to probabilize and to continue to adjust. So your models have to be very flexible. To give you a couple of examples, we have a SaaS company selling in the gym and spa world that is classic ARR, MRR, ARR type revenue. They forecasted a base case 20% reduction in revenue, a case 2 of 40, a case 3 of 50, and they're continuing to dynamically iterate on that as they get more feedback from customers. We have a transactional business that is forecasting 0 revenue for 3 months and then a very small uptake thereafter. And I've got every shape and size of business that I could talk to. And in general, sadly, draconianly, they're forecasting downward given their customer bases. Okay. The other thing I would say is that we are seeing any really organized company that has a significant customer base is scripting the inbound flows from customers to deal with how to triage them, how to move them up the chain if they're looking for things like pausing or discounts or these types of things. And they eventually get a cadence where they understand how to do discovery on inbound and how to manage and how to allow things to happen to give, to allow keeping the customer, discovering some needs that you might be able to help with, but also giving them some relief where needed. Okay. On the other side, costs. So costs we break into 3 categories, and again, all triage driven and obviously business driven, but it's headcount, discretionary non-headcount, non-discretionary non-headcount. I'll talk about headcount last. Discretionary non-headcount, that's things like marketing, that's things like travel, meals, entertainment, some contractors, those types of things. In general, what we're seeing is people are taking a hatchet to those costs. Those are usually your first line of cut. Some are cut naturally by the way we're changing the nature of our work, but in general, people are looking at those as the first line to start their cuts, okay? Of course, I can caveat that to say if you're growing, you may still be able to market if it's very relevant to the crisis that we're in, but in general, we're talking about downsides. The second category is non-discretionary, non-headcount, things like rent, things like interest on debt, things like taxes, insurance premiums, those contracted payments that you need for your business and that you're not able to just walk away from. What I've said to people is this is the first time in any crisis that I've been through where these types of expenses appear to be becoming deferrable or super negotiable. So we are seeing a lot of discussion at the landlord-tenant level, and I'm going to speak to that a little bit later, around rent abatement for a few months to allow a business a reprieve, but to keep the tenant. Or retail stores are actually literally starting to just say, we can't pay our rent, we're not going to pay our rent. Landlord, what can you do for me? And the list goes on and on and on. Governments are allowing deferrals of tax payments and filings. There's a lot of waiverability of debt interest and principal, depending on who your lenders are and what kind of support they're getting. So the point is that you have a lot more play in that set of cost categories than we've ever seen before. Third, headcount. This is an important area. It's also the human element. We're going to talk a little bit about the human element. Let's remember that. This is a societal thing. These are existential issues. These are people. These are your people. We need to be authentic. We need to be genuine. We need to be cognizant of mental health issues and just the cash flow impacts and so on to people's livelihoods. So it's a serious area. That said, as we know, most sadly in the tech business are having to do some form of headcount reduction, and in many other industries. How does one do it? There's a spectrum. You consult a labor lawyer. Termination is the kind of extreme, and then it backs off from there. Things like layoffs, things like, reducing everyone's salary downward and hours downward, but still keeping them employed by mutual agreement. There's something called a work share, which is a program that was developed in an earlier era that they've adapted to COVID. You've seen the wage subsidy stuff starting to come out of the government. I would say the ecosystem and the innovation ecosystem isn't the happiest, but some may qualify for that and may be able to use it. My point, I guess, more broadly on headcount is to make sure that you're reviewing all government programs and that you're taking advantage of them. And again, it's a kind of a group effort here to keep people employed as much as humanly possible. They will be so grateful when things restart and you can then get their hours back up. They will remember this in times of crisis and so on. Last but not least on cost, payment terms. So we've just talked about the actual side of costs. Like collections, you have payment terms. Those are going to become and are super negotiable. and can be pushed out. We're seeing, remembering the other side has the same issues. So there's this kind of collective thing going on in the business community around that. And if I tie it all together, if you take your cash balance now and you take all of these inflows to collections, you then take all of these outflows to payments, okay, you then end up with a cash balance by week and then by month. And when that number goes negative, however, what period of time that is, we call that the cash out period. We're going to talk next about how to think about that and how to think about financing.
Okay, let's pause there for a sec. So Brice, what I'm kind of hearing you say is what's important to survival right now is cutting costs severely, like cutting until it hurts, and maybe then even do some more reaching out for any assistance we can from the government. There are tons of programs. I'm hearing you say we should all go back to any expense we have and renegotiate terms. Something I did was I just canceled my credit card and just like let things expire and got a new one for anything I actually use. And I think you're probably going to talk to us about the growth side and generating more revenue later on, right? Yep. This is like what I'm hearing you say is be harsh on cutting costs.
Yeah, this is not, I think, again, I come back to this tech TO thing. A lot of the feedback that I got was it was a bit of a wake-up call, and people maybe hadn't been thinking about the situation as urgently and as triage and as wartime. This is wartime urgent triage. Your survivability is in question because of the broad business and society implications, and you need to treat it as such. I've been in Globalive in its early years, was selling to a customer base that all went bankrupt in .com 1.0 and had to reposition to a new customer base. The guy running Mars, Young, was in .com 1.0. He lost his customer base when it bankrupt. He had to cut 90% of his costs, including staff, take the kernel of tech that could be repurposed and rebuild a business that became very successful after the crisis. These are the types of thinking that one needs to move their mind to. And it's hard to emphasize it to people who haven't been through it, but I try to use the word like wartime and urgency as much as possible.
Yeah. So money's going to be hard to get from investors. It's going to be hard to get from customers. And so you must preserve every penny that you have. Cut any cost you can.
You got it.
Okay. So let's talk then. Can we move into the fundraising and like runway and talk about what would you say to us on that domain?
100%. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a quote. Okay. And this quote is from a gentleman by the name of Jerry Schwartz, who is the CEO of Onyx, which is one of Canada's most successful private equity firms. Quote, all our businesses will be affected by the crisis. A few will suffer near total shutdown for some time. During that time, they will consume cash, and much of that cash will be lost for all time. Then those businesses will reopen and again serve their customers and generate cash. And what I want to do is I want to focus on his comment about cash will be lost for all time. And that is a salient and scary comment, okay? And that is the crux of the problem of this crisis and survivability is what's happening is that cash lost is cash spent that is effectively keeping a business from dying and not necessarily creating positive equity value, which is the normal route when you think about implicitly how you spend, how you raise capital, how you raise equity, how you raise debt. And that paradigm falls off when you get into survivability. And what that means more specifically is that if you incur debt to, say, push your way through this, that's debt that has to be paid back, that has a cost of interest, that has maybe a picking cost if you're deferring, and that's all a post-emergence drag that did not probably add a lot of equity value to your business. And I can draw that exact same analogy with equity. So you raise equity now, it's all uncertain. There's a ton of valuation compression happening right now, and that's just kind of moving you sideways to get through a crisis. So the conclusion on that is that you need to be extraordinarily sparing in how you think about utilizing capital right now, unless you're in one of the very odd circumstances of growth. Okay, it's actually really interesting. Andreessen put a collection of resources out on the weekend, the Valley VC, and they, these Valley guys have been growth at all costs for the last 5 years. And then I see an article on it's time to focus on efficiency, not growth. And I'm like, okay, that's actually a fair statement. It's interesting who it comes from. But efficiency would be the word here, not growth. Okay. Now, VCs are saying, let's go to runway. VCs are saying 24 months runway. Guys, I am not a VC. I am a family office investor that crosses a ton of asset classes, as I've said. And I do a lot of venture fund investing and a lot of venture direct investing. And it's a luxury in my experience to have 24 months of runway. Okay, let's be honest. Typically companies raise with 18 to 24 months in mind. It's very rare that everyone hit the cycle perfectly entering the crisis. So the reality is that you're not going to get perfection on runway. What I will say to you is if you've done your forecasts, you've reset your expectations, you've been honest about sizing your costs, you've maximized your government support, and you've taken probably a mid to worst case scenario, and what pops out of there is something less than 12 months, you got to get very, very serious about talking to your funding partners. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how to do that. The other thing that I'll say is, as I've said before, the cost of capital is implicitly significantly higher than it was before the crisis by virtue of forecasting uncertainty, by virtue of less capital chasing deals, by virtue of, all the things that happen in a crisis. So back to my core thesis, raise the smallest amount possible to move you sideways through this crisis. Okay. And I'm not going to keep restating the caveat there. If you're Zoom, well done. Okay. And we'll leave that part there. Okay. Fundraising considerations. Okay. So I was on a webcast last week that a VC that I've invested in, that we're LPs in, articulated their view of the world. And it goes something like this. In a normalized environment, if you take a VC's portfolio, you put a little bell curvy kind of style thing on it, and you say, I'm going to categorize my investments into 4 categories. And I say this to you because to raise money, you have to walk in the investor's shoes in crises, okay? Point 1, companies that they call "you are dead to me." Sad term, but I think we all know what that means. The company was funded, it didn't really perform, and it's kind of in the penalty box. In any scenario, crisis or non-crisis, that is what it is, and they are kind of not going to get much of the VC's attention. Category 2, entering the death zone. That means that they funded them, the company may not be performing, they're still alive and moving, but they're in the bad part. They're viewed in the second worst part of the portfolio. Category 3 is what they call the zone of hope. This is a zone that they see prospect. The company hasn't quite got there yet to be the true 4th category, but they see hope in the future of this company. And category 4 is what they call a darling. That company is on its way, doing what it was supposed to do from a funding thesis, and is killing it. The darlings are obviously in great shape, barring a complete catastrophe right now in their customer bases and so on, and where they fit with what's coming out of the crisis. But the point to this is how VCs are viewing the world is the death zone has gotten wider. More companies that previously were in the zone of hope are now getting a much more scrutinized eye put on them, and there many more will move into the death zone. So what that tells me, and I could add to that the fact that all LPs are telling VCs to call as little capital as possible. All VCs are doing almost daily monitoring of their portfolios. In the same way I talk about cash out dates, the VCs are monitoring their portfolios that way, such that capital is more scarce, and it is not an easy thing to hunt right now. Okay.
Brice, can I ask you, you said LPs Please. Are asking VCs to do as little, what right now?
Capital calls.
Spending.
So the way the model works is I'm an LP in many venture funds. I make a commitment to that venture fund for $500,000. Let's use a number. And then what ends up happening is they don't call all that money from me the day I make my commitment. They call that over an investing life cycle. And so think about this. So at any point in time, Globalive Capital has a bunch of commitments that they've made to the VCs that haven't been drawn yet. Of course, in a crisis, I, as an LP, am watching my liquidity. I'm doing exactly what I'm telling you guys to do. I just do it with a different style of platform because I'm an investment company. The first thing that I do if I get a capital call right now is I call the person calling the capital and I say, how much capital are you calling? Why are you calling it? Why are you not managing this defensively? And tell me what your plan is for the rest of the year. And the message is so clear that, and it's very common, again, this is very common in crises, is that as much as one has all this committed capital as a VC or a PE, they will get pressure from their LPs to manage that. And that all trickles down to portfolio level fundraising.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay. Yeah. So next, in spite of all of that negativity, there is an adage that says the best investment returns are made during or just after a crisis by investors who are able to capitalize on it because there's less capital chasing deals, valuations are compressed, and the strong survive. So you get 3 or 4 factors that all come together that actually create the circumstances for perfection almost for investors. Okay, so it's not, the point here is it's not a zero in fundraising. Okay, here's how I prioritize fundraising and how I would think about it. Number one is if you happen to have been working on a round prior to the crisis and you are getting close to the goal line, get it closed if you haven't already. Okay, and you might have to make some trades. We've seen a number of rounds trade down in valuation, particularly, and maybe some other terms, but the point is that they were able to close respectably and take their runway up to a rational level. So one is close what you might be trying to have closed before and make some concessions if you have to. Number two, as I've kind of been saying throughout this, understand the impact the crisis has on your business and prepare a bottom-up new set of forecasts. Do not tweak an existing. You need a new set of forecasts, properly scenarioed, that gives you, that takes you back to these first principles we've been talking about: unit economics, path to profitability, away from growth at all costs, honesty about why you can actually stand there and say, I can make this projection based on these kinds of metrics and these kind of analogs. And if you can do that in such a way that gives you enough certainty that an investor, you can take that out to the investor community and they get it and they believe it and they buy it, then you have the makings of some kind of a fundraising. If you can't, it's too wide of a forecast requirement, your customer base is just in chaos and dishevelment or what have you, then no investor is gonna find some kind of magic beans to invest in you. You are going to have to deal with other issues of survivability, okay? But let's assume that you are able to do that, what I just said on resetting your forecast and having a defensible forecast. Where do you begin? So obviously you start with your existing investors. You expect support from them. And equally importantly, if they don't support you, that is a very, very important sign, okay? And it will hurt you if you go out broader to market to do fundraising and you do not have support from your existing investors. So I almost say you need to have existing investor support at least to some level, almost at all costs. Because then you can say to other investors, my existing investors are coming in, and that basically implies that you've done some term work with them to get something around what this financing might look like, okay? If you need to look at new investors, some principles. Number one is you have a massive risk of opportunism and significant valuation compression for the reasons I've talked about, but that is just the reality. Where would I begin with new investors? So first place I would start is if people follow, I do a lot of presentations in the ecosystem on how to fundraise, okay? And we believe that fundraising needs to be treated like enterprise sales. It's a top to bottom of funnel exercise with a wide enough spread to the investor community that you narrow down to those that are relevant, that like you, that warm, strategic, all those kinds of commentary. And that can be a multi-year process to both enter at the top of the funnel and ultimately to close an investor. If you've been doing that and taking that advice, then what you will find entering a crisis is that you will have a lot of relationships. The nature of how they look at things may change, but you can go back to them, you can have honest conversations with them, and you can see what their appetite is, and so on. So that would be point one. Point two is referrals from existing investors that are obviously warm, and that's a normal thing in fundraising. Point three, if the story narrates a certain way, there are funds that got lucky in the fundraising cycle where they raised recently, they got a ton of dry powder, and they're now out there scouring to meet this adage of never better to invest than in a crisis, okay? And if you can get your way to them using normal fundraising techniques of networking and warm introductions and so on, you can have some discussions there. I would say generally that's gonna be tough. Due diligence is hard to build trust and all that kind of stuff, but it would be, part of the bailiwick that I would look at. In general, if at all humanly possible, and if it's a survival style scenario, I would try to stay away from other than using existing investors, okay? I'll spend a couple minutes on debt, Alyssa. I don't know how much this crowd is using debt, but I'll give it.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll give it a 2-minute. So Guys, the principles of debt and taking on debt kind of go as follows. In a larger company, a Fortune 500, 1000, Jill will know this well, in a crisis, all these companies have these operating credit lines that are revolving and drawable. So the first, you might have read the news, Delta Airlines, these types of large corporates, the first thing they did is they drew all of their credit lines onto their balance sheet. Why did they do that? They wanted to have the liquidity and cash to strengthen their balance sheet to move them through this crisis. There is a cost to doing that for companies like that. It is interest. We know that interest rates are at an all-time low, and it's a pretty good trade, I would argue, to strengthen your balance sheet. Can we draw that analog to venture? So we know a bit about venture debt as a group. We know that there's a lot of things that are happening at the BDC, at the banks, and so on to try to push debt out there. I think in some instances, it can make sense to take on debt in the venture portfolio for the right reasons. However, I want to be careful. I want to bring it back to that notion of cash being lost and destroyed forever. If you're funding that through debt, you have to be doing it with a clear eye to a refi in the future that you need to do using either equity or in some cases cash flow or other debt, and you have to have the financial strength and wherewithal to do that. It is much harder to do that in a world of venture where it's typically a loss-making scenario.
So Brice, coming out of YC, a lot of the fundraising advice was pretty much exactly what you're saying here. Like, close fast. The best time to fundraise is right now. It gets harder every day that goes by. Close the people you know first, whoever's the warmest, existing investors, interest from existing investors. Those are all the best. It's going to be a hard road otherwise. The only difference I see was a lot of the advice we got was raise as much as you can now, even though the advice was lower your valuations. Raise as much as you can now because you don't know what the next 6 months to 12 months is going to look like. Whereas I think I'm hearing from you, like, actually try not to raise too much.
Okay, yeah, fair point. And I think there's as with any topic in this world, we can debate both, and there's probably fair points on both sides. Look, I am a use capital. Johnny is on this call, a good friend of mine from the old Globalive days. He knows it well. I am a guy, we are a group that is so focused on capital efficiency as a construct that what we would try to do is we would say, okay, let's target that 18-month. Actually, in many cases, you actually have to show a path to profitability now to be successful with a raise. So partly, if that's the mentality of the investor, your investment might all be partly sized to that notion. So you could argue that might be the most that one can raise if that's the mentality. But let's assume that you are looking a little more survival and triage, which is the focus I've been trying to take here, then what I would look, and you're probably going back to existing investors much more so than a new crowd. In that case, you're almost having a negotiated discussion with them that says, look, every piece of advice I've gotten is I need 12 months of runway, maybe 18. I've done all this magic to size my business this way. I have a revenue stream that's not going to zero. So you've had that narrative, and that pops out a number of X. And let's talk about dilution. Let's talk about if we do that as a convertible note or how we do that and so on. So that's kind of the scenario I'm talking about. I do not view that as in conflict with what you're talking about. It's just a slightly different lens put on it.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thanks for clarifying. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a good point, though. I don't mind that as a point. I'll be honest with you. I think it's decent advice.
Cool. Okay, if there aren't any other questions on fundraising, if somebody's mid fundraising right now or wondering how, should you go out now or wait another 6 months, pop them in the chat. Otherwise, Brice, I'd love you to take us through how can we grow? Like, how can we think strategically about what's before us?
Okay, this is great. So this is the second order, people. We are now at that point. And by the way, actually, we're at exactly 100 participants, which is pretty cool. So good segue into this. So we've done all the things that we've talked about. We're wartime, we're triage, we got our communication cadence, we got all those good first order things done, and we've even shored up our balance sheet with some financing such that we see runway to 12 to 18 months or beyond, to Alyssa's point. Okay. What happens now? Okay. And let's talk second order. And this can be a future call in more detail, but we're going to hit it at the surface. So the first thing that we talk about, and I've posted a thing in the chat here, a link to a McKinsey article. And look, we're all gonna be careful. McKinsey are big company thought leaders, but I found this article to be very, very useful, and I'd encourage you to click on it so it's up in your browser. McKinsey's recommendation is to formally set what they call a plan ahead strategy and framework as part of this overall crisis. Okay, and I'm calling it plan forward, but the point is to put structure and framework around the fact that you have to get beyond the next week or the next day. Okay, and you only win by doing it in a structured way. And I alluded to it a little bit earlier. That means designating people for the new world of sales. That means designating people for the new world of customer contact and discovery. That means designating people for new ways of communication and forcing people to think a little more forward than what the triage wartime people are feeding. And there's almost, and we're hearing this a lot, CEOs at larger companies are basically saying we have almost two main sets of activities. That I wake up in the morning and I fight a bunch of fires, and then in the afternoon, I take a breath and I bring my plan ahead team in, and we suck in all this metrics and dashboard data and every piece of reporting that we can get, all this customer feedback that's coming in. We've scripted back to customers to get discovery through them and so on and so forth. And that's then causing, iterations about how we make changes to our product and how we do this a bit differently, and it's done in a leadership frame, very similar to having a C-suite daily meeting, but with a plan ahead lens. Okay, so that's message one that I want to get out to this ecosystem now, is that we have to get into thinking a little more forward than the day-to-day crises. Okay, now, and use everything that you've done in triage to not duplicate. So if you've got communication lines, use them, just add to them, things like that. Okay. The general commentary that we've got on customer, and I've listened to 3 or 4 hours of sales podcast, sales web video casts that are kind of like this, where there's a guy like me or 5 or 6 people like me on a call who've gone through what happens to sales and customer in a crisis. Okay. And I've heard full pipeline wipeouts. I've heard full product wipeouts and revenue wipeouts, and how does one rebuild from that, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different contexts for this. And if I could summarize, and again, we're going to move through this quickly, and I've sent John a sales framework around protecting revenue and go-to-market strategy changes that I would encourage him to circulate to the group. It's a PDF from a sales consultancy. But the theory is that you need to, you're not, let's just put some common sense to this. You're not calling your customer with the same sales pitch and an attempt to close something that was late in the funnel pre-crisis with the same discussion. A customer would not only laugh you out of the room, they'd hang up on you and they'd call you insensitive and not even receptive to kind of true needs of the situation. So the reality is what people say is you need to walk arm in arm with your customer. You need to almost stop thinking about the sale right now, and you need to understand what points of value you can bring in the context of their business or the consumer as it relates to the crisis. Okay. And the best ways that I can say, so there's tactics around that, like have video on and make sure that even if your customer doesn't put the video on, you talk them through it. And what I hear from most salespeople is by the end of that hour-long call, they're turning their video on because they've gotten comfortable, and now you're having a personal interaction. You break through some of the ice. Or there's 100 examples of all these kind of personalizations using virtual effectively and so on. But if I could distill it again, it becomes take the notion of that classic kind of, we got to close at all costs, and turn it into a value partner discussion. Think of yourself as part of the customer's executive team as it relates to whatever your value proposition is to the customer. Okay. And I want to give a few examples. So let's talk about a few companies in the ecosystem. Top Hat. Okay. Most people know Top Hat. Did someone say they worked for Top? Alyssa, you never worked for Top Hat, did you? Oh, did you work for Top Hat?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, I thought you said Wattpad. So Top Hat. So our ex-CTO at Globalive actually is now the CTO of Top Hat. He just took on a role there. Interesting timing. But Top Hat's interesting, right? They provide a platform for post-secondary education, digitalization, and so on and so forth. Arguably positioned almost perfectly for this world. What happens? The crisis starts. All the education institutions are trying to figure out life. All my students can't come to class now. We've got to go virtual. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. They went out to their customers and they said, we are working in a frantic way to add value to you. And we want to know the 3 things that you need to do that will get you through this school year and make sure that your students finish their semesters and blah, blah, blah. And the number 1 item that came back to them, I don't know if I would have called this, is they needed a proctoring of exam functionality virtually that allowed basically you to use digital remote to proctor and ensure people aren't cheating on exams and so on when they read exams. So they did a scramble. I think they rolled it out in 2 weeks. Mike was on a Tech TO talk and he said, we 10x'd our leads on the back of that add to the module. Okay. Touch Bistro. Touch Bistro, you've got to think you're pretty scared as Touch Bistro right now because of the restaurant industry. Okay. They went out to their customers and they found that if you take Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever they are, Fedora, Skip the Dishes, all these places, they charge restaurants between 25 and 35% of the order value for the service they provide, bringing a customer in the delivery. That's a huge amount. The restaurants lose money on every one of those orders. It's factual. So what they said to Touch is, we need to beef up our online ordering. We can control the delivery, but we need online ordering where we don't have to pay Uber Eats. And Touch Bistro quickly mobilized. They already had part functionality. They built it and they rolled it out. The point here is that, and again, I'm going to take it back to first principles on customer discovery in a second, but the point is pretty clear. That feedback loop of customer interaction and taking every opportunity of a discussion with a customer to turn it into a discovery exercise, figure out what their points of problem are and where you can add the most value, and you're not a smarmy salesperson on them, is kind of the new world second order approach. Okay. And I mentioned earlier that we were going to talk about some of the first principles of customer discovery. Here's the script on this. Okay. I'm a mentor at Creative Destruction Lab. Probably some of you have gone through there. The format of Creative Destruction Lab is 6 meetings over about a 9-month period, and ventures come in very raw at the start of this. Okay. And what I have found in the first 2 meetings, so the first, call it 6 to 8 weeks of the program, I can almost create a recorded script around the lack of discovery that they do and how they should think about it. Okay. And I'll give you my poster child example. We had a group come in that were building a product for the fiber optic industry that were 3 super smart engineer PhDers that had a cool sounding and looking product. We asked them how their customer discovery informed the product and how their commercial traction was going. They had never talked to a customer. It's weird to say that, but there's kind of this truism in Canada that we're great engineers and we're horrible at sales. And when you hear examples like that, it's like it should all be done in reverse. You go talk to the people that would buy this product that are using fiber optics a certain way, and then you architect a product that meets the thing that you're trying to do better for them. So get back to that principle, okay? Turn outward, reconnect with your customers, and use the following tips and techniques that we say. Number 1, get your team into a virtual room and have an internal brainstorming exercise around extensions of your existing product and new use cases. And in some cases, I've seen companies have to go find whole new customer bases already and attempt to, which is hard to do, obviously, but they've lost their customer bases. That exercise turns into, here are our 5 top use cases that we think as a team, and here are 5 customers that we can talk to for each use case to inform our view of the saleability of this in the current environment. Next, create a questionnaire that structures your customer discovery in a way that the answers that come back can be quantified in a similar manner, a like manner, such that you can see trends that come back from customers to allow you to know where the big red flags are for them that you can focus your efforts. Number 3 is then get out to those customers either on inbounds from them which may have some type of issues around the crisis, or outbounds to friendlies that you can actually get a little bit of their time framed in a way that it's relevant to them and the value that they need. And that turns into then something that creates the logic of what I'm talking about, what a Top Hat or what a Touch Bistro did and so on. Okay, I think there's opportunity to be more structured than just flailing around and kind of da-da-da, and that's how I would recommend it. The other points I would make on this around discovery is we need quick product iteration. So I've said it earlier, 75%, 50% even is good enough. Release it in beta to friendlies and do not worry about being that engineering 100%. Number 2, keep iterating and then get it into production. Number 3, limit or eliminate as much as humanly possible IT involvement in the process, okay? That's deadly to a virtual work environment where IT are just getting killed with remote work and so on. Pricing. Okay, this is super interesting, okay? And you've got to be careful here because your competitors are thinking about it as well. If you're in a tech stack for a company and you are one part of a tech stack and you have competitors in the stack and there's overlapping potential in future or other modules that can be extended, you have to be fighting those competitors as much as they're going to try to fight you. And you have to potentially do things, i.e. in Touch Bistro's case, they added that module, extended it to their customers at no cost for a period of time. So you've got to be cognizant of pricing and being probably more friendly with pricing to save the core revenue streams and to ultimately, turn that into that value issue that I've been talking about for your customers. Watch the competitive landscape. Watch what your competitors are doing. Watch the undercutting that could happen. Okay.
Brice.
Yeah.
Inside of this framework, Julia's wondering, she's heard about building a customer advisory board as a way to gather feedback. What are your thoughts here?
I love customer advisory boards in normal times. You gotta always put your lens on crisis. Are you going to honestly be able to get a customer group together that will spend the time to do whatever it is you want them to do while they're fighting their fires? And there may be examples where that makes sense. So if you were to convene some kind of a COVID specific top 5 issues, urgency type thing, and we want to bring 10 customers together for 1 hour to talk our way through these things and get a set of priorities and so on. Could I see some of that type of action? Yes. I do not see those kind of classic customer cadences. Well, we'll have a monthly meeting and we'll talk that. That's for a different time. Okay. But yes, there is value. If you can if you get a Zoom call together like this with 10 of your top restaurant customers in whatever function is relevant to the value you're offering, and you run them through a very structured agenda with the 7 things that you're trying to achieve and how they view each of them and where they would spend time and mind share, I think there could be value to that. And they will tell you if there's value to that, because you should ask them.
Exactly. And what I'm hearing you implore us to do is get our heads out of our spreadsheets and go talk to our customers. This is golden rule at YC2 and really the thrust behind the entire learning, which is just going and talking to our customers and asking about their problems. So, frameworks we've learned are just asking people, what's hard right now about doing your job? What's the hardest part about it? How hard is this for you? How frequently does it come up? And just picking up the phone and calling them. What are your thoughts on that and getting in touch with them?
100%. On the calls now, they're different because you don't want to call in the old world of, hey, can I help you out and lower some prices for you and provide you with a better tech solution? No, you want to put it to very value specific things that are solution oriented to the current world. But yes, the concept that you're talking about absolutely applies.
Yeah, and really just asking them, what's hard for you right now?
100%. Can I add one other point on?
Please.
Now, this one I haven't tested that far yet, but it's starting to hit my radar more. And this is, one has to be delicate here with this comment, but as we know, there's been a lot of people that have been laid off in the tech ecosystem that are super talented people. They will be looking for their next gig. It's hard to get a gig right now. I don't think it's out of turn to speak to some people that have been laid off. If you have a prospect for them ultimately of work in the future, depending on how your business evolves, and to ask them for some of their opinions on what they saw, if it relates to a similar analog, a customer base that was similar, or a scenario or a tech component that was similar. I think that you will get time from people in the ecosystem that are looking to add value and that are also looking for their next opportunities. And I think that's a fair trade.
Awesome. Okay. We've got about 15 minutes left. And Brice, we've got a couple questions from folks around fundraising, if we can jump back there for a sec.
Absolutely.
It's mostly around timing. So folks are asking, they've gotten advice to wait a month. Should they wait until they close contracts that have been deferred? In my experience, fundraising today is way harder than fundraising 30 days ago. And a lot of the advice I'm hearing is fundraise now, because we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. What are your thoughts now versus waiting?
Yeah, I think that you go out, if you need to fundraise, okay, you are at that point of essential need, I think you go now, okay? And you will tell your investors, in the case that I'm reading up there, If I'm waiting for a commercial contract, it's very common in fundraising. Let's get out of the crisis for a moment and remember first principles of fundraising. When we look at fundraising across 4 dimensions, guys, and maybe this has got some value for you. Talent, so the team, product, commercial traction, and fundraising path. Are you B2B, B2C, all that kind of stuff. Our team is first, obviously, and if we can't get past the attributes of team, then we move on. We emphasize commercial traction more than product traction in our investing thesis, but both are important. And what I would say to you is, don't forget those fundamentals. So if you are seeing progress commercially to a signed contract in whatever your domain is, or multiple, and it's related to some value out of the crisis, and it's replicable, and it can be an analog to a projection, that's fine. Get out there, fundraise, talk about that as part of your point of commercial traction. I always say maximize your commercial traction and however far along it is. And by the time you close that fundraising, that's going to land or it's not going to land, or you're going to have more color on it or whatever, and it'll help push it along. So I don't see 30-day make or break as my tendency is to shoot the gun now.
Yeah, I agree. Go now. We just don't know what it's going to look like in 30 days. Another question I'd put to you is, what advice, I mean, you've been in the trenches, you built a company over almost a decade, you've been through all these crises. Founders are already a little bit insane to even do what we're doing. What would you say around managing our own psychology, keeping momentum up, deciphering what we should do next? Like, how do we manage ourselves during this crisis?
It is an exceptionally good and important question. Okay. And here's what I'm going to answer the question first as the founder. And then I'm going to answer the question. Then I want to make a point more around people and culture and thinking about your people. Okay. Perfect. So I get this question a lot. I do this WIN presentation, which I'm working with John now to do it for the next cohort at Next and their alumni, that talks about the WIN story, start to finish, and the roller coaster ride that we went on. And it's a sweaty story, I'll be honest with you. Like, it's ugly. We almost lost the company 3 times to bankruptcy. We were fought every which way by Rogers, Telus, and Bell. You guys kind of have some probably flavor for that story. People say, how did you, that was 8 years of my life. Okay, that's why this haircut is so fine right now, right? So people said to me, how did you guys get through that? Okay. And one of my comments back is, I woke up in the morning and I had a list of issues and fires and items, and I kind of got out of bed. I had my shower and I put one foot in front of each other, and I had a routine where I called Tony and another business partner, Simon, on the way in, organize ourselves, and then we would go and do what we had to do, call on the way home, go to bed, wake up the next day, put my foot, one foot in front of the other, and just keep walking and walking and walking, and let nothing stop us from our broader mission. And that is the advice I give to people. Break things into digestible chunks, use principles of program and project management to disaggregate it to things, prioritize them smartly for the current environment. Your priorities have to completely change now, and execute on those in a digestible manner. Okay. Otherwise, you can let your brain fly so far, you can get so stressed out and so on, and it's ground yourself. Okay. Now, on taking that point further to people and culture, I wasn't thinking about it this way. And then I had a super important conversation a week ago that I want to relay to this group. Okay. I was doing, how everyone's doing these virtual parties now on Zoom and so on. It's crazy. So on a Friday night, I was doing one of these virtual parties, and I had a senior banker from TD and a senior banker from Scotia on the Zoom. And we were talking about, they are, to be working in a bank right now is super interesting with what's gone on with their need to push capital out to fund loans and and the government is using the banks as a tool for liquidity and so on. So the guy at Scotia told me, he said, since the crisis happened, we figured out how to get people remote working. We have worked 20-hour days for 3 weeks to push as hard as possible to deal with all the issues coming from the government and coming from the market to keep the economy moving. And you think about it, we have 5 banks that basically manage the economy of Canada from a liquidity standpoint, and they're one of them. He said that we had an all leadership hands call. It was probably a day before I got on a call with him, and he said, we have decided that we are bringing Medcan, which is an executive health service, into a virtual mental health set of seminars for our entire employee base to start helping them through both the virtualization, self-isolation, and loneliness, but also the pressure that is coming on them from all the different constituencies coming at them. And I can draw that analog to the innovation economy. We run thin as businesses. Our runways change so radically in a month, and the stressors and the layoffs and the this and the that are extreme. And so my commentary generally to the ecosystem is, obviously you have to survive, but remember the human aspect, remember the people, authenticity, as I said in the discussion of headcount and so on. Where you can, reduce salaries, don't lay them off, and try to hold on. But remember the mental health aspects. And if you can do something for your people and yourself to help you through that, I think it's actually very constructive.
That's awesome feedback. Yeah, you've been in the shoes of all of us.
Yeah, I didn't know as much. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm an older school guy. I'm 49. I didn't think about mental health was not a thing when I was kind of coming into the workforce and so on. When I took over HR at Wind in 2000, I want to say about 11, that was the point in time at which the importance of people, culture, mental well-being, and how people treat each other, upward, downward, 360. I kind of got religion around that, and I can't extol the importance of that enough, and the benefit that will give you to your business of being able to have people be able to take a breath, refocus themselves, maybe go off and meditate a little bit and just kind of gather their thoughts, come back, they will be less stressed and more productive.
Yep, totally. So what I'm kind of hearing from you is this, like, reach for every financial branch you can get, especially if it's coming from the government, even better if it's coming from your customers. I'm hearing you say cut costs severely, like so much that it hurts more than you feel like you have to, because the future is just uncertain. I'm hearing you say fundraise now, make concessions, except you're going to have a lower valuation. You may have to take some other terms, but raise money now, raise it quickly, raise what makes sense for your business. And then I'm hearing you say, go talk to our customers, like ask them what their problems are, find out how you can help them in the context of the crisis, and don't be obtuse, acting like the whole world isn't under siege here. Are there any kind of general mental frameworks you're using to navigate everyday life, whether it's in your work or in your personal life, or maybe both?
Yeah, so I am a big framework believer. My framework of choice in normal times is good to great, from Jim Collins, if I can use a framework that people may know. I'm a big believer in flywheels and the momentum that they get going. In fact, I did a presentation on the Canadian innovation ecosystem flywheel, which I believe prior to this crisis, we started to really have our flywheel rolling for ICT. And we were talking in Ottawa about, can we extend that to life sciences, and can we extend that to clean tech? And I'm hoping that after the crisis, when we talk about reconstruction, there will be a good end there. But if I could summarize what we did as part of this from a business standpoint, is we tried to go back and find examples of other crises and how people handled them. We used .com 1.0 as a particularly big one because it was also tech community impacting. And we do use a credit crisis a little bit as well. And even though every crisis is different, there are playbooks for how to work your way through it. And I can tell you that tech TO talk about right-sizing your business, that was straight out of distressed acquisition 101 playbook. Okay. I can tell you that the sales people that I've talked to that have informed me are straight out of the credit crisis full loss of funnel playbook, or the September 11th shutdown for about a month or two. Okay. So my point, and you've seen my framework, okay, for this: first order, second order, third order. You've heard it narratively more elaborately in first order today, and a little bit of second order. There's more to be talked about in second and third order, but that's my framework from a business standpoint for managing this. And there's actually I think Mars is developing a formal playbook using that as the framework, and I will release it to you guys when I can get my hands on it. So so more to follow on that, if I can say it. But what I've been trying to do is fill in, if I'm thinking about sales in second order, like I said, I had to find something to ground it. So I found the sales consultancy that were on a call that we had at Mars, and they had a 1-page PDF that talks about protecting revenue, new go-to-market strategies. How do you think about that? And it's get pretty good infographic, if you will. That's my current sales thing to use as a stopgap measure until we get a little more elaborate playbook, and the list and that VC presentation that I mentioned that I listened to that informed how to think about financing, that added to the playbook. And so start with a framework. It's not going to be a perfect 50-page manual. Add to it as you learn more, but find something that you can use to ground you. I don't know if I'm the best person to talk on the personal side. I'm a structured person. I kind of figured out a way to split my time between Globalive Capital's investment portfolio, and I'm actually it's super important to me personally to be able to give back to this ecosystem that has given so much to us. So I've probably done 7 or 8 of these now, and I'm seeing how they're evolving into a more structured, elaborate, and better framework discussion. And I want to do more of these in the ecosystem and give back more of my time to that. That's kind of how I'm framing my life right now.
And we appreciate it. I think everybody on this call is benefiting. We still have more questions. So if you're okay to keep going, is it all right if we answer?
I'm totally good. And remember, okay. I have to conclude with those 2 comments as well.
Yeah, we'll make sure to do that. Okay, Julia's wondering, any more tips on how to build new relationships and trust virtually? So 1, we're hearing turn on your video. What else have you got?
Yeah. So Julia, where are you there? Can I see? Is your video on? Oh, there you are. Hey, haven't talked in a while. Julia was at TechTO for a period of time. So the goal, I think, is to do the same behaviors that you were doing in the regular pre-crisis world, but adapt them to the current world. So we use video back and forth and the tools around remote work to make them as personal as possible as category 1. And I'm no more or less an expert on that than anyone else. The other things that I would say is that, again, determine relevance. So if you're going to go, let's use our customer discovery example. If you are on the fence about whether what you're walking through in terms of discovery makes any sense in terms of urgency in the current situation, who would you call for that? You wouldn't call the customer you know the least. You would call the customer that is trusted, safe, and will never punch you in the face, and so on. So it's a similar thing where you have these networks that kind of ripple out from you in terms of how well you know them and how well they're trusted and how well they trust you and so on. You want to do all of the same styles of behavior in the context of a slightly different way of working. And if you need to go further afield from your networks, what do? You always try to hunt a warm intro, or you try to frame things a certain way if it's cold on why you're doing this that's super relevant to the current scenario. So what I would say to you is, like any company in Canada, probably, if you take your Next network and Techstars and about 4 or 5 other networks, you will be able to find a warm intro. Make sure it's a very good reason to have that intro. As I've said, you need even a better reason than you did in the past, and use all the normal tools at hand to extend your way out to that. Those would be kind of my basic comments. And I think that people, look, I've taken some inbounds where people have been, I would like a one-on-one with you to go over. And in fact, in one example, it was a 3rd order comment. A person wanted to talk about mergers and acquisitions because they had some opportunities they thought to acquire some competitors at a very good value. They had no M&A capability and they had no corporate development group. So they came to me and they said, we want to talk about your experience in M&A. So I did a one-on-one for an hour with that company around what are the best practices of M&A in a normal time and how they might want to tailor it to the current crisis. So everyone wants to help. Okay, we're all trying to be, we're all trying to help in our own way and so on. Just be yourself, be authentic, and do it in a similar way, but using these tools that we have now.
I think that's a really good point. It can be so easy to stiffen up on video or just like watch yourself the entire time while you're on. Just like being yourself, understanding we're all in the same situation. So that speaks loudly to me.
As a general comment here, I see that there's a very long couple of paragraphs here on the BDC program. So the CVCA, so we didn't get into a ton on government support. I do have a narrative on everything, and including government support. I won't take you through it. It's about a 10-minute. But the CVCA, so the Canadian Venture Capital Association, sent out, we're members of that, sent out a kind of a communication talking about it, and they're holding a webinar tomorrow. What's most interesting to me with the BDC program is how do they classify a qualified venture capital firm? And we are members. We're a family office more than a venture capital fund. So I want to understand a little bit more of the nuances of that. But there will be a lot of information flowing on that program in the next week online and so on, because everyone is now getting grounded in terms of what that means.
And where could, so there are folks who would be interested in the longer version of that. Where could they get more information?
So the CVCA is doing a member-only webinar tomorrow. I'm going to attend it. I'll see if materials come out through that mechanism, and if they are, if there's something publicly shareable, I'll send it to John. So that would be route one. And then route two, I have a feeling that you're going to start seeing a lot of the typical information sources start to circulate on this. Mars, some of the accounting firms and so on. I think you'll start to see more of that. So I would just be monitoring that, and I'm happy to filter a little bit your way as you guys see fit.
Perfect. We'd really appreciate that. There have been a couple of questions on hiring. So tons of companies have done layoffs now. Yep. I guess the questions I saw were, it seemed like around the ways to approach these folks. Somebody's asking about the downsides to hiring these workers on an unpaid basis. I guess what's your thinking here around approaching these people?
Yeah, so you're not hiring people unpaid. That's not the way the world works. I did mention the concept of having a discussion with people as part of a discovery process to potentially have an honest discussion about what information you're looking for and what the trade is for them, and if there's going to be and if there's an opportunity for them in future and why they would do it and so on. So I think that there is opportunity for a short consult around certain issues and items and so on. But if we're talking about true hiring, okay, and I mean real hiring, okay, so you're hiring an employee, you do have a lot of interesting things you can do right now. You can do contracts for periods of time. If we're in periods of uncertainty and you're not comfortable that it will necessarily work long-term because of the nature of the crisis, you can do part-time style where they do 3 days a week, as an example, at a prorated salary that would then turn into potentially full-time week at the end of the crisis, however that's defined. Those would be probably the two that I would say. And if you're moving away from, let's not talk about creative hiring, let's talk about actually hiring someone. If you're going to hire someone, bring them onto payroll or contract. There is a virtual onboarding approach that one would do that. Think of it as a lot like a real world onboarding, where you want to get a nice group of your employees together. You want to have them do a bunch of one-on-ones to get organized and to understand the company and what their role and function is and the culture and so on. And you want to give them good direction, be it virtually, that allows them to step into their role and do whatever it is that you're hiring them to do. But my point is that this is not predatory, this situation, okay? That's my point here. This is fair to both sides.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. So hiring somebody unpaid is not hiring them. Your opportunities are to do contract work, part-time work. Okay, I have had a couple people who have pinged me privately and mentioned here who are enjoying growth from the crisis. And so we're asking about kind of how do you fundraise? How do you take advantage of this? I'm not sure your advice will be different, other than if you're doing well, whether you're doing well or you're not doing well, now is the time to fundraise. Either way.
People are closing rounds.
Yeah.
In those scenarios where they're viewed, like there's a lot of remote style companies, cloud backup or this, or remote work or workflow done remotely, or this, X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of people, not a lot. There's a number of people closing rounds that have some really kind of interesting opportunities in this era. What I will say to you as an investor is that I am curious about some of those theses, because if you have a crisis that creates this change for 6 months, let's pick a number, okay? What happens after that 6 months? So what happens if we all go, let's just take one extreme. Let's say it all goes back to normal, and all of the benefit of that product and how it was escalated fades because of a reset to the old way of work. So there's got to be more logic to why these investments are closing and so on. I think you have to think about things like that, and investors will ask you a lot of questions around that. But if you are truly in a net growth scenario, both as a result of the crisis and also a defensible post-crisis continuing growth, then you know what? You fell on the lucky side of the universe here. And you will still have to be careful fundraising because capital in general is more scarce and VCs are more defensive, but you will be in a far better position following those principles to be successful.
Great. Okay, we have 7 minutes and you had 2 points that you wanted to leave us on. So we'd love to hear those now.
Yeah, let me just finish up here. So what are we thinking about, call it government-wise, as we look forward at how the support is happening in the ecosystem? And there are two. Okay, so I'm not going to do the whole government support conversation, but at the highest level, the government has done a labor support for people that are no longer working but were working and are no longer working as a result of COVID, and that's called CERB, which most people have probably heard of by now. They talk about extending that to people that they missed in the first round, students and people who are working very minimal hours but still working. So we'll see what happens there. That's the non-working labor subsidy. There's a wage subsidy that we are aware of for labor in companies, and sadly for our ecosystem, a lot of the revenue calcs and some of the other criteria are not going to work that well for us. But let's see if they keep working on that. There's 1,000 people lobbying Ottawa right now to get more support there. We have all these different capital programs around loans, around BDC, EDC, around banks, and so on. So we'll call that another category. We have the deferral of taxes and all tax filings to provide working capital style cash flow extensions and less administrative burden. And then we have two other areas that not a lot of people are talking about, but they're thinking about, and they haven't yet figured out what the solutions are. And I want to raise this with you guys because I'm putting it out to the community in the hopes that it'll boomerang back to me with some ideas. And number one is occupancy costs. So we got through April rents and utilities and property taxes as tenants, as landlords in a rational way. But we think that the May 1 rents are very, very scary right now. Both residential for people that are either solely on CERB or are affected in a negative way that don't qualify for support. And look, let's be honest, $2,000 a month is not going to pay Toronto rent. So we really think residential rents on May 1 are going to be very compromised. Number two is commercial rents, retail, restaurants, things like that. We've seen form letters sent out by chains that say, we are no longer paying any rent to you, landlord. What are you going to do about it? Okay. So if I just spend 1 minute and say to you, if you think about the flow of occupancy, you have tenants, okay, residential and commercial. You have landlords, okay. The landlords typically have debt, which means the banks, and they pay utilities and they pay property taxes to municipalities. And you have that ecosystem which flows cash kind of, as we know, monthly or whatever. It's not as easy to manage as labor, where everyone has a social insurance number and you're on a payroll or you're not. And there's no centralized repository of tenants. There's no centralized repository of landlords and so on. But we feel like there is a very significant risk of a breakdown in the rental and call it occupancy market on May 1. And we are sticking our nose into some thinking about solutions there. And if anyone has some ideas, bring them to me, because I'm talking to about 6 or 7 organizations about that. Number two, and this is a bit longer term, we're casting a net a little longer here, is in Canada, bankruptcy and insolvency legislation goes on 2 paths. One is you enter with the intent of emerging as a going concern in a reset company. In the US, they call that Chapter 11. In Canada, we call that CCAA. Or you go into liquidate, and we call that Chapter 7 in the US, or BIA, bankruptcy insolvency in Canada. We view that there is, and this is kind of depressing to say it, but we view that there is a very substantial risk ahead of a large number of insolvencies in the Canadian economy. And we think there might be an opportunity to look at a third regime on a temporary basis that changes how the stacks and priorities are handled in bankruptcy with some government assist in the socialization of some of those costs. And again, it's early to be talking about that, but we are not far off, we think, of some of the businesses that have been hit the hardest going under. So those two areas, and any thinking of what other countries have done or what other places are doing, or any of your own original thoughts of trying to insert at the point of least complexity and maximum impact, I am all ears to talk about that. So
Okay.
that's where I'll leave it.
So you would like people to reach out to you over email, LinkedIn? How do you want us to get in touch?
Actually, you know what? Good point here. Let me do this here. Where do I do this? Everyone. So if the first test on LinkedIn for me is if you can spell my name, you've kind of passed a test. So I'm putting my name up there. You can hit me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at my last name. And email. Here, let me give you my email. Please don't assault me on email, but I'm sending it. Okay.
And you would like us to contact you if we have ideas around what to do about May 1 rent or alternative bankruptcy options, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Anything, Brice? Like, what are the main hit points you really want to hit home with us? Like the 3 to 5 things you want all of us to walk away with.
Okay, so it's hard to obviously distill everything into, but let's hit them. Let's go theme wise. So get your first order in order. Triage, wartime, crazy, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Number 2, the financing and fundraising. Close what you can. If you still need to fundraise, keep it within as close to your network as you can. Be sparse if you're doing a survivability raise. Be bigger if you're doing the raise that Alyssa had talked about with the Valley advice. The runway. 12 months, I think, is an important boundary. VCs would say longer, but I'm just trying to put a reality check on that. And cast your vision as a founder forward to new opportunities, customer discovery, plan ahead, plan forward, and thinking about the future alongside all of the chaos that's happening.
Amazing. That's awesome. And I know what I'm taking away from you is go back to first principles of the business. Think of efficiency, not just growth, and ground yourself. Breaking things down into super tiny chunks so that we can have daily wins if we're not getting monthly. And then looking at how other companies and other economies have come out of crisis. These are the things that really landing with me.
I think Alyssa is going to be coming along with me for all of these from now forward. You are the best Alyssa, you are the best summarizer of whatever I say. I talk a lot and you summarize well.
Thanks. All right. We'll team up and do a little rodeo. Okay, folks, reach out to Brice if you've got ideas on what to do about rent and how to help companies through bankruptcy. Brice, we can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you so much.
You guys are all awesome. And we want you to come out the other end of this. We're going to be working on reconstruction after, and we're going to just keep going. This is the best ecosystem in the world, and you guys just keep hitting it every single day. So best to all of you.
We've got this. Thanks,
Take care
Brice.
all. Thank you very much.